today's video, we're going to be working on this Guilliman for a large Ultramarine order I had to work with. We're going to do a custom base, get him off of his tactical rock, put him on some better looking rocks, and we're going to try to paint them a little different. There's been, so many people make Ultramarine videos all the time, so try to be a little unique in the way I made this paint recipe, but kind of got away from me at one point, but I think I brought it back. I think it's nice and vibrant. I think the gold works nicely with it, and the contrast of the red Mars base is really nice. So let's just jump into it. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to work on the base. Pretty simply, what I did was I just took his base he came with, grabbed some pine bark chunks, then I found some good ones that match his feet, and I just glued these down with some super glue. I just made sure they kind of fit the area his feet's going to take up, and I used other smaller pieces to have like an outshoot rock for his foot that he kind of like presses up on an angle, and just use super glue to glue this all down. Right before I finish, I need to just test fit everything, and then the super glue works pretty good, but you'll want to pin this stuff down, so using the back foot and some copper wire, I just pinned him into the black rock, and then finish up the base with a little bit of Vallejo diorama paste, earth texture. It's a fine grain, it works like sand, it's pretty good. You can also just use sand and glue. This pot's getting a little old, so I have to get through it, so I've been using that lately. Here's my triad I'm going to be going here: a dark Prussian blue into an ultramarine, and then a Hydra turquoise, a light turquoise to finish. So what I'm really going to do is just mix in my dark Prussian blue with my black primer and cover the model in this. Like I said, I did a whole army this way, so this is all the same painting steps I used to paint that larger force, so I am skipping some steps that I would normally do. Once I have that base coat down, I'm going to mix dark Prussian blue with the ultramarine and kind of do a zenithal, 50% to 75% angle all over the model. Since I'm just painting this one separately, I did a few more half-step mixes between like the Prussian blue and the ultramarine just to give some smoother transitions. You can go one to the other color if you want. You can also do this all on a sponge. These are Space Marines, so they take well to a normal sponge. Next, I just mixed in some of that turquoise to the ultramarine, and I just focused more on the top of the cylinders, top of the armor pads, backpacks, all this. Guilliman has a ton of gold trim, so a lot of this is actually going to get hidden, but still, it looks pretty good as is. Okay, now that I have my 3 zenithals basically down, I'm going to wash the model over with a mix of medium, speed paint medium, and Highland blue from speed paint. I'm going to try to really work this into the recesses, and really do this as a recess wash. So it will tint a lot of the model as well, but we really want to make sure we're not pooling too much. So I am going to continuously wick pools away once I've applied all the speed paint. And this isn't a dirty wash. This is a tint, but we don't want to pool too much. So in this process, this part of the paint job, I've kind of lost my way here. This is way too blue, like turquoise-wise. It's like, how is this going to get back to ultramarine? So I kind of just took a shot and went back to my ultramarine paint with the sponge, and I did a very haphazardly, focusing on the tops of the armor panels with this ultramarine blue, just to try to knock it back down from this super light turquoise. And what actually happened was, the mix of the turquoise and this ultramarine going back on top of it gave it this interesting undercoat that made everything way more vibrant. So it does end up coming out closer to the McCrack blue that a normal ultramarine would be painted with, but it's a little more vibrant because it has this kind of undercoat of turquoise to it. And I didn't plan it, but it came out this way, and I like it a lot. So I'm basically just gonna keep it as is. Like I said, the trim's gonna cover a lot of it anyway, but I'm just gonna kind of fill in with the rest of my colors here. Just using some black to basically base coat any weapons, anything that's gonna get metallics over it. And then for metallics, I'm going to use a mix of burnt iron from Vallejo Metallic and Grim Black Speed Paint just to knock it down a shade or two. I like a little darker metal on this because I really want the blue to come out and be really pop as much as it can with all the trim I have to paint. Now to all the trim, my favorite part. Serenity now. There's so much of it on this model, so you want to just get a sharp brush. Again, I wanted to have a little bit of desaturation in my paints here, especially with my metallics. So I ended up going for a rich gold from Pro Acryl. Mixed in, I actually mixed in some silver to this. You can use any silver. I just used I think I used Vallejo silver. I really wanted to tone it down a little bit. I didn't want it to be really with those brownish notes. I wanted the blue to really pop, so I'm keeping this more like a kind of old silvery gold, I guess. Also, I just need to cut in any other missing pieces. You can do my purity seals, and I used some neutral greens around for his wreath and those things. After all this, I gave it a quick kind of pin wash with some black oil. Honestly, I didn't do a whole lot here. I just made sure I hit the recesses a little bit, and then I came in again and just reapplied my colors, working up on a higher red, Mephiston, a pure red. I did a little bit of a screen on the back of his backpack. That was pretty simple. That's just basically working a intermediate green up to a lime green, and you just kind of like stipple and dot it with a glazed consistency, and you just kind of make a pattern, make a little screen out of it. You can focus the screen towards the top or the bottom, doesn't really matter. You're just kind of working with glazed mediums to make a little bit of a transition. And of course, nothing's in focus, but that's just the way it always goes, right? Now I'm gonna come back to the Vallejo Silver Game Air. This is like a beautiful little silver coat, and I'm just going to work with not only my dry brush but a regular brush, and I'm just going to work on kind of tipping and tapping and scratching up some of this gold. I really want the silver to be the highlight of it because that's what we're going for. Put this towards the eagles, anything that's got a raised surface for the metallics. Work on his sword now. Pretty simple grill here. We're going to use the normal colors that I would use for any fluorescence. So base coat everything to white pink. There's going to be a little bit of overspray, but nothing crazy. It is a flaming sword. It should give off some good light. It is a flaming sword, so it should be giving off some good light. Before I get to the colors, though, I wanted to make sure I had a nice edge on a lot of this metallics, because the metallics would be reflecting this light. So I just come in quickly with just some white paint and hit the edges of his eagle shoulder pad. We'll start off with the fluorescent orange, just going to cover all the model and the overspray. Next, focusing on the edges and the tips of the flames with a fluorescent red. And then we'll knock down that fluorescent red with a normal acrylic bloody red, or you can use a vermilion or a scarlet. Any of these colors work. Then we're going to stipple and dry brush on a burnt red and a black. Black goes towards the very edge, since that side of the blade would be the coldest. Now you could do it the other way. You could make this edge the lightest side. I've seen that done before, where the blade is like flaming hot, like yellow hot, and then the flames come off of it. But I like this this look a little bit better. You know, might not be the most realistic. I'm going to use some demonic yellow to stipple and dry brush the kind of beginning of where the flames would start. You know, I'm just focusing on the fire at this point. And then the last step is a quick AK fluorescent light orange liquid pigment in the birth of the flame. Give that nice contrast. Doing the base now, I'm basically just going to use pigment powder here. So I'm starting off with my darkest pigment, which is I believe brown oxide, which I believe is brown iron oxide. I'm going to make sure I'm jamming this into all the nooks and crannies because it is the darkest of all the pigments I'm using. Then I'll move on to old rust. I'm going to be more selective on where I put, you know, this pigment. I'm going to keep this toward the edges. A little bit on the rocks, but nothing crazy. As I'm working, I'm constantly knocking and brushing off pigment powder, but also jamming my brush into the other pigment to mix them together on the base. My lightest color, I'm going to focus that towards the tops of the rocks. Again, this one gets blended in the most because there's just a lot of pigment on the rocks, and it works out well. I'll come back in with my brown iron oxide too to blend it a little bit more if I need. There's spots, but you're basically just working this pigment powder all over the base, having nice gradients where you can get them, but also the haphazard nature of pigments also helps to sell the effect. Lastly, you really want to jam in whatever color. My whole army had the iron oxide on their feet, so I really just jamming that color onto the feet to get the dusty on the foot. There you have it. Pretty simple Guilliman here. There's a million Guilliman videos and Ultramarine stuff. If you're interested on how I did the rest of the army, this is what it looks like. Just let me know. I have to paint up a Titus, I believe, and some other models for this army down the road. I could always cut some videos on that, but really quick one here. Hope you guys liked it. Catch you guys in the next one.